We are hearing over and over and over and over about this group of young men in society right now, specifically between the ages of 18 and 35, that seem to have lost their way. They are extremely misogynistic. They have a complete lack of direction. They are susceptible to cult-like behavior. They're very, very susceptible to messaging and propaganda, specifically from the right. And I believe they're all confused and have in some ways lost their way in this society that we currently live in. Which, once again, if you think about it, kind of makes sense. Stick with me, I'm Roy Arthur. This is Unbelievable Reality Podcast, and today I want to talk about fatherhood. This is a topic that I have wanted to discuss for a long time because I am a father of 3 boys and 1 beautiful young woman. And over the years of raising these children and being a single dad for a good period of that time, I've learned a thing or two, and I want to talk about that today. But before I get going, as always, I start with a literary reference, one that I just keep coming back to. This book is called Dopamine Nation. If you haven't had a chance to read this, you really ought to take some time and read it. It's a deep dive into dopamine receptors, dopamine's effect on the human brain, etc., and why we chase dopamine buzzes in so many ways. And the reason why this is so relevant to me today, because I have to admit some honesty here, is that I have another channel on TikTok and have a pretty significant amount of followers on there and likes, etc. And I found myself, and I'm also, with full transparency here, I'm in recovery. So I have over 40 years of experience with addiction in every format you can possibly imagine. But being a recovering addict, or whatever you want to call it, I don't like to label folks with addiction issues, but being somebody that has addiction issues that's in recovery, I found myself behaving with my social media channel almost like when I was using. And it took me a little while to figure that out. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy fuck, what is going on? Why, when I get 1,000 likes on a video, do I get so fired up? Why, when I get no views on a video, am I so depressed? Yeah, irony of ironies, just like video games, just like drugs, just like alcohol. Social media feeds our dopamine addiction. And this is a country filled with dopamine addicts. We're all looking for a buzz, whether it's coming from drugs, alcohol, social media, the gym, sex, porn, fuck, you name it. It all comes down to the same thing, and that's a dopamine rush. So, to give you a better understanding of folks that have addiction issues, I really recommend that you take a look at Dopamine Nation. It's an eye-opener, and it's something, it really will give you pause. And also make you go, fuck, do I do that? Yeah. You might be surprised. So, let's get back to today's topic though. Let's talk about fatherhood. Now, in the news lately, we are hearing over and over and over and over about this group of young men in society right now, specifically between the ages of 18 and 35. That seem to have lost their way. A lot of these are college graduates, young men that are still living at home. They are extremely misogynistic. They are violent. They have a complete lack of direction. They are susceptible to cult-like behavior. They're very, very susceptible to messaging and propaganda, specifically from the right. And I believe they're all confused and have in some ways lost their way in this society that we currently live in, which once again, if you think about it, kind of makes sense. But being a father, I wanted to talk about a father's role in raising young men and where we as fathers can go wrong and have go wrong, and why fathers, I believe, bear a massive amount of responsibility for the state of young men today. So let's begin with this simple fact. This is a fact. Children form their identities, their entire identities, who they are, what they believe, basically their morals, you name it. They form all of those characteristics and behaviors and traits basically in the first 5 years of their lives. And they model on their parents. Now, one of the things that the right loves to call an epidemic, I don't know if it's an epidemic or not, is the reality of single-parent households. How many women are raising children on their own because the dad dipped? This is a common occurrence. This isn't like yesterday's news or some sort of earthquake shock to anybody that's watching this video. You have to know numerous single moms that have custody of their children where the dad shows up once every 2 weeks on their weekend when they get their visitation, and that's their attempt at being a father. And during that period of time, and I speak of experience here when I talk about that because my parents were divorced when I was 5 years old. My dad is a member of the boomer generation. The boomer generation as a whole is a whole fucking series of podcasts. But suffice it to say, if there was ever a more self-centered, entitled group of people in history, I don't know when or where. Somehow, some way, something happened to the boomers. I don't know if it was the entitlement of the wealth that their parents, the greatest generation, worked so hard to build. I don't know if it was the ease of education, the quality of education, the luxury of living in a home where mom and dad were both still married, happy or not. Dad went to work, mom stayed home, stability in the home. I don't know what exactly spoiled the fuck out of these people, but all you have to do is look at our current political system and the boomers that run it to see everything that is wrong with that generation. And when it came to parenting, and to go beyond that, to grandparenting, these people fucking suck. Now, there's exceptions to every rule, and I'd like to throw that out there at this moment. They're few and far between. The boomer generation is a narcissistic, self-centered, egotistical group of me-first human beings that have led to environmental destruction, capitalism run amok, the loss of labor rights, the loss of women's rights, fucking A, you name it. I hate to ruin everybody's day, but I gotta trace it all back to this generation. And maybe that's because they were also a transitional generation and they just transitioned in the wrong fucking direction. I don't know. But we are all products of that. Back to this 18 to 35 age set that right now seems to be so lost. 50% of all marriages in the United States end in divorce. And of those divorces, 85% of custody goes to the mother. Now that's not just because, and if you think about it, in a lot of instances, that's the mother's the least financially equipped to raise and nurture children because the father, according to American society, is the bread fucking winner. First of all, let's crush that myth. The myth of dad as the breadwinner and the head of the household is dead. Dead, 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 dead. That died in the fucking 60s and 70s. Thank you, Milton Friedman and Ronald Reagan. There are so few households in this country that can afford to live on a single income that it's almost unheard of where a mother's allowed or able to stay home full-time and raise the children. And yet this mythology of that being her fucking role permeates our society and makes men treat women as lesser than. Now, do you think that might have any effect on a child in his formative years of 0 to 5 years of age when dad treats mom like she's less than he is? Because even though he's doing that, mom's still going to work. Because you can't own a home in the United States of America without two incomes. Not unless you're in a professional environment. Doctor, lawyer, finance, upper level management. Unless you're in that upper echelon of income where the father makes $150,000 a year or more. And that, my friends, is only 9% of society as a whole. If you're not in that financial set, mom's not staying home. Mom's got to go to work. So, is this leading to discord in families? Absolutely. We have more research on this than I could quote for the rest of my life. Two working parents in a family is destructive to the nucleus and the security of the family, specifically for the children. It's a fucking fact. But this capitalistic society run amok has put us in a position where that's almost inevitable. So, let us back up here though. Fathers have such a limited role now in raising their own children. And that's fact. In addition to that, fathers, men are raised with a false narrative. I'm a dad. My dad dipped out when I was 5 years old. I saw my father occasionally, literally. He had visitation in custody every other weekend. He managed to be consistent with that, never. There would be months that went by where I never saw my real father at all, nor heard from him. He never called. And then he'd show up like Santa Claus and grab us and take us on wonderful adventures, my brother, myself, and my sister. And the world would be glorious and we'd be in awe of my father, who was the magic maker. Because he only had to do it 2 days a month if he bothered to show up. My mother remarried several times after that. I feel now, in looking back, nothing but pity for those quote-unquote stepfathers that had to try to step in and parent young men who didn't have a father figure and were resistant to somebody else trying to usurp that position. Think about that dynamic and reflect upon your own situation. The reality is today is that we follow constructs and mythologies in this country that no longer serve us, and yet we cling to them. Fathers and men, period, are raised with this myth of the Old West, of the steely-eyed lone warrior who has to make his own way, who pulls him, I'm so sick of this fucking phrase, I'm going to use it, but it just makes me want to vomit, pulls him up by his bootstraps. Ugh, I said it, I'm sorry. That digs it out of the dirt, the self-made man. That's a fucking lie. It's a fucking lie. It is a set of values that no longer exists. Every billionaire in the United States of America today, and there's 2,500 of them now, every single one of them is not self-made. Almost every millionaire, multimillionaire in the United States is not self-made. Every single one had money and education from their fucking parents to go where they've gone. And any Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Larry, what's that motherfucker from Oracle, who never ages because he loves plastic surgery. He's 86, but his face looks like he's 42 and it'll never change. They can dig him up 150 years after he dies. It'll still be the same. Larry Ellison. Every single fucking one had a head start. But the average family doesn't have that head start. In addition, we're starting behind because our education system is collapsing. There used to be a time when you could take your kids to school and trust that they would be safe, fed, and they'd learn something. Those days are fucking over. There used to be a time when sports for boys was fun and interesting and in school. Now we have basically professional teams for fourth graders in basketball, football, baseball, pick a sport. Nike sponsoring kids in middle school, for fuck's sakes. So where is that outlet? Where is that avenue? The odds of being a professional athlete are infinitesimally small. It's equal to pi. And if you don't know what the equation is for pi, this is probably where you should check out. Going back to fathers. Fathers are raised in America and have been for the last 3 generations to be the strong, silent type. To be violent. Let's get honest. Okay? In high school, come on. You remember the bullies? By the way, when the bullies grow up and get into real life, the nerds kick the living shit out of them. But you remember the bullies, and their parents were bullies. And this is leading to my point on fatherhood. What's going on with our young men in America today? What's going on is that their fathers are living under a set of rules that no longer fucking apply. If you're a kid that goes out and gets in fights, you're in the legal system and your future's fucked. You're a kid that was planning on going to work for Ford, GM, just like Dad used to, where he made his money, got a pension, retired, we owned a house, had 2 cars. That no longer exists. If you're a kid who's fortunate enough to go to college, if you're a young man, you go to college, you get a 4-year degree, you think, okay, I've got a degree, I come out, there's no jobs. But it's how young men today deal with these realities that shows the fatal flaw in fatherhood in this culture. And that flaw goes back to, once again, the broken mythology of the self-made man. The broken mythology of digging it out of the dirt. The broken mythology of not showing your emotions to your young man. The broken mythology of a man being better than a woman. All these kids that are doing this crazy fucking shit on college campuses. Your body is mine? Are you fucking kidding me? Super sorry, I saw my son do that when he came home for vacation. He'd never leave home. He might leave home, but that's going to be after an extensive stay with some medical supervision. These kids aren't learning this on their own. They're being taught this by their fathers or lack of their fathers, which is even worse. Because now you've allowed video games. Now you've allowed Charlie Kirks. Now you've allowed propaganda and media to shape the mind of the young man that you helped create. That you take no responsibility for. If you're an absentee dad, you're worse, almost worse than a dad that's at home that parents in false ways. If we want to raise well-balanced, intelligent, emotionally mature young men, we have to show them that. A great example. I just did this real quick before I did this podcast. Look up books on fatherhood. This is fucking crazy. Okay? This goes along with the broken fucking mythology. Raising Men. Okay? This is a great one. By a former Navy SEAL. Man your post. Learn to lead like Saint Joseph. The mythical Saint Joseph. What the fuck? Fighting shadows. Overcoming 7 lies that keep men from becoming fully alive. What the fuck? Wait a minute. The Fatherhood Principle. Now that one is actually a pretty good read. But the majority of these books are all about manhood and this broken mythology. We live in a society and a world where men and women are equal, like it fucking or not. We live in a patriarchal society where men abuse women because there's one reality that makes us inferior to women. And we can't deal with it. The reality is only women can reproduce. Men will never, ever, ever germinate a child in their womb. So you give up sperm. That's it. You alone cannot create life. And I personally believe that subconsciously that is why men have subjugated women for centuries, especially since the beginning of monotheism 2,500 years ago. Thank you, Judaism. Which then had the offshoot of Christianity, which then had the offshoot of Islam. All monastic religions. All patriarchal based. All subjugating women. Ever wonder why? If you're a man, look in the mirror. If you abuse a woman, that's your mother. And without your mother, you don't exist. And without her mother, you don't exist. And so on, and so on, and so on. To keep this short, or short enough to fit in, I go back to this. The reason that there's a problem with young men in the United States of America today is because their fathers are not teaching them correctly. We are not leading them. We are not teaching them to show compassion. We are not teaching them to temper their attitudes and behaviors. We're not teaching them to be patient. We're not teaching them to be good listeners. We're not teaching them to be respectful to women and to honor them as the bringers of life on this planet for our species. And we show it in the way we treat this very earth that we walk upon every fucking day. Environmental degradation is not the work of women. It is the work of man. And it's everywhere. And it's destroying the very world we live in. Damn near every technology that's run amok and caused humanity grief is the device of man. What we really need right now in this culture, and I'm not saying you can't teach your young man to defend himself. Absolutely, because there's a lot of young men out there that are dumbass motherfuckers that all they know how to do is throw hands. So you better teach your son how to defend himself and throw hands back. But only when absolutely necessary. It should never be first option, and yet for so many young men it is. That is a lack of fatherhood. That is a failure on the part of the father. That is what's wrong with men fucking in general. If you cannot have a conversation that's rational, open, and understanding, how do you really expect your son to solve any problems in the world? Because here's a gentle reminder for every man. There's always somebody bigger. There's always somebody smarter. There's always somebody richer. There's always somebody faster. There's always somebody better. How do you get along with that? Once again, this is Unbelievable Reality Podcast. I am Roy Arthur. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Substack. I love to hear comments, love to hear feedback, love to hear questions. Please feel free Until next time, be a good dad.